Now we're going to hear a talk on games licensing. Video games today are much more than fun, it's business. And the part of this universe that has developed the most in recent years is licensing. In this panel, we'll talk about how publishers and developers are dealing with this demand and also how brands define their licensing strategies in gaming. So let's invite in our speakers, Julia Medeiros from Riachuelo, Bruno Soares from Ubisoft, and Bernardo Mendes from Druid. Hey everyone. Hi. Good evening. All right, the screen is yours, guys. Make yourselves at home. Hi everyone. Wow, this is fancy, isn't it? My name is Bernardo Mendes. I'm from Druid, as Nivi said, and we are an agency focused on gaming. I'm here with Julia from Riachuelo and Bruna from Ubisoft to talk about game licensing. We have a very short amount of time, so I'll cut to the chase, and then I hope that we can answer some questions from our listeners, from our watchers. Let's start with Bruna. Ubisoft is one of the biggest references that we have in the gaming universe. And I'm not brown nosy, but they really have ruled this industry before other brands even started exploring it. So, Bruno, what was it like to work in it, and how relevant is it for Ubisoft's business, if you can tell us? Thank you. First, I'm very happy, Bernardo, that you said uh, those kind words because it really is a big challenge. Our licensing department is relatively new when we think about it. It started taking shape globally about 8 years ago. Ubisoft has always focused on our core business, which is, making good games. We focus on our main business. When we started developing licensing here in Latin America, as a side note, although we're here in Brazil, we covered this entire territory. So it was a big challenge. We had some studios. Ubisoft has 27 studios around the world. So it's a very complex business. We have two divisions today. We have Europe and the Americas, which is obviously the one we work in. And it is a strategic area for the company, especially because we have a very big portfolio, right, Bernardo? We don't only depend on a couple of titles. We have at least 10 major titles. So we've worked with Julia, we've worked with Rainbow Six Siege. So although our department is very strategical, it's also fragmented. Licensing means that you need to understand Just Dance, Assassin's Creed, Rainbow Six City, excuse me, Rainbow Six Siege, Rabbit City. So each one has their own specificities. It's a big challenge, but like you said, we have a dedicated team here in Latin America. So there are agencies that work with us, and that's also essential for our licensing business. You have agencies that work with uh, licensing companies like Ubisoft, and then you have a company like Riachuelo, who is a licensee. We have great agencies helping us in making those connections. Great. And now passing it on to Julia from Riachuelo. Julia, you basically took everything you had in the market, right, available. As we were talking, you didn't leave anything to your competitors. If you need anything, you can just go to Riachuelo. Legendary brands that really touch our hearts, like Super Mario and all of these lines. Even the greatest movie launches, you can only find the merchandising in Riachuelo stores. So, how did you capture this industry and how do you select your titles? Because there's a lot, right? But all the things that we want to get. So, how do you know? It's tough because this market is very fragmented, right, Bernardo? So every day there's a lot of new brands, games, movie titles. Well, I think the film industry is a bit quieter now because of the pandemic, but On the other hand, games have had a major boom. We've been following up on that. We've been looking at the gaming market. So we also started with Ubisoft and other brands. We started investing on this a long time ago. And we have for the past 6 years. But it's not easy. It's not a simple thing. You have to be able to translate the DNA for each brand and the desire of each gamer and each fan. So, for example, people who play Just Dance are very different from people who play Rainbow Six. And people will say, well, just make a t shirt. But it's not just like that. It's not the shirt that's going to make a difference for this gamer. You have to go really deep into their mindset. But to try to answer your question, we have been seeing a lot of diversity right now. So our portfolio is the broadest in the market. And we work with capsules, and as we say in the fashion industry. So we try to bring new things through these small moments. This can be done through many different ways, but with e-commerce on the rise for the next months, we really hope to be the main destination for licensed products in Brazil. But it is very difficult because Bruna knows about this. We are very fortunate to have this with this partnership with Ubi, and they've always been great partners from the beginning. From our first conversations, they've understood what our needs are. That's a major challenge for the market. You know, oftentimes you have wonderful games, you have a great audience, but you don't have any material to work with. Or it's not the kind of file that you're going to be able to use for a great collection. With Riachuelo, we have a comprehensive portfolio in all categories. So from accessories, socks, underwear, belts, caps, backpacks, pajamas, everything we think about in terms of apparel, but we also have a great department for homeware. So, you know, everything we used to see in catalogs from abroad and think, well, why isn't this in Brazil? We were able to bring here. So we were able to bring home where, you know, that goes from mats to silverware. We have shoes. So licensing in Riachuelo doesn't work with cell phones yet, but everything else we do carry. So it's important to remember what you said. Publishers need to understand where we're coming from too. Right, and this was a good segue for me. Of course, we planned all of it. No, we can't say we rehearsed because I only connected like 3 minutes before. Right, but the last question I have for the two of you before we get questions from the floor is this. What do you think is still missing in the Brazilian market in terms of licensing? How can we improve? Who wants to begin? Well, you take it, Bruno. Let's go through alphabetical order. Well, I just want to mention something that Julia raised, which is how interesting it is that the film industry is very well prepared for licensing. They're extremely geared towards that. In gaming, although this is the biggest segment of entertainment, even though we have so many great figures, we could be here for hours talking about our industry. But it's not like the movie industry, right? When you take a Pixar film or whoever it is, for that week when it premieres, you already have, action figures and shirts. So in gaming, we still have a long way to go. We need to have better guides. I think it has improved. I have no doubts, but it's clear to see that although we've evolved, we still have a ways to go. So it's great to talk about this here with the audience, right? This is the backstage of the process, but we still have a long way to go as studios start thinking about games. And we know that it's 7 years between having your first idea and the final product. But as soon as you have the idea, start thinking about the licensing process. How can you have relevant characters and all of that? That's a strong discussion in Ubisoft. How can we get ahead of that process? Julia has access to Mario and Sonic, but these games have been here for a long time. Yeah, they're classics, right? So when we talk about new games, it needs to be thought about. Another point I want to raise, though, and this is a part of your question, is how can we develop it? When we talk about licensing today, a lot of people still see licensing as that traditional way of selling shirts in Riachuelo that have, a Rainbow Six Siege character. But when we talk about licensing in gaming, it goes far beyond that because you can have promotional licensing. We've had rabbits in McDonald's, rabbit characters in McDonald's. So that's a one-off that we can do. You can do, cross licensing. Next week, we're going to have a Just Dance reality show with Coca-Cola on cable. So that's also part of licensing, right? It's also licensing for Coca-Cola. We're also working on another one, and we have our fingers crossed so that it works out. But there are several possibilities in licensing. And often when we think licensing, we think about apparel, but it can go beyond that. We, as publishers, have to think about how major brands can work in the games industry. And we talk about having game content, but that's not necessarily required. You can make it into licensing, and that's very relevant when you talk about local needs. So there's a long way to go. We have made strides in the last years, but I'm sure that for the next years, we're going to see even more growth in the gaming market and licensing.
Go ahead, Julia. You can complain at will. Well, it is a new market, right? It's a young market. So when you compare it to publishing, the difference is that these studios understood what it's all about decades ago, how licensing works, how this business works. So Bruno was speaking about what happens backstage, right? People sometimes have no idea how things work, that you just go and you print something on a t-shirt and it's done. But we have about 6 months work to work on a collection, to work on the models, to look at raw materials. And if there is a new major movie coming out, I start getting materials about that project 1.5 years beforehand. So I'm already getting material for movies that are coming out in 2022 and 2023. So that is already organized into my schedule and timeline. So we work a lot with China, for example. I need at least a year notice, right? I need to be aware at least a year before the start. And for the industry, for that publisher who really only thinks about his game, he is just shelved and working the whole time, pulling all-nighters, trying to finish his game, and he's like, what? I need to give you the materials about the games a year in advance? No, that doesn't work. And okay, fine. So, and then I'll give you the material. And then he gives me a logo. And then he says, hey, now you can create your whole collection. And I say, no, take it easy. That's not how it works. At Riachuelo, we have a fantastic structure in licensing and in graphic design. We have people who will work with the prints and who will develop them. And it's a very thorough team. It's a complete team. But what we need to really improve on when it comes to gamers, and I mean, I already see substantial improvement. Say in the past 5 years, it has come a long way, but we have to improve on when it comes to materials. We need the materials with more time ahead, like earlier than they give it to us. If you're going to have a launch in 2 months' time, then you can't come to us with that little time in advance. And Luby is one of the few publishers who, have this flexibility and who is concerned about the whole project, not only about the value. All of the licensors, all of the studios, we're not here just to pay the initial fees of a contract, right? We're here to please the fans, to please gamers, because they have to find the best t-shirt in Riachuelo, be it for Rainbow Six or whatever other game. I want them to be able to find a mug, to find a cup. When you look at Mario Bros. And when you look at Sonic, you have a broad mix of products, in a number of categories. It's amazing. And that's what fans are looking for. They are fans of that brand, not of that category. They don't need to understand what the category is all about. So we need to modernize this market around contracts and licensing. And we need to get the materials further or earlier in the process. We have 2 questions. I thought we're not going to get any. And the first question is actually very nice. Julien, do you see the licensing market as an open market for indie games? Do you think the licensing market is open to independent games? At Riachuelo, we're trying to better understand this market. This is a massive market, right? The gaming market. If we'll think about figures, numbers, strategies, it's massive. 80% of the licensing business has to do with studios, right? So we're adapting. We're adapting to this new market. We are taking our first steps. And we're really, working on understanding it all. But if you think back on this last year and everything that has happened with the pandemic and how everything has been accelerated as far as digitalization is concerned, then we've made progress. But at the start of 2020, e-commerce wasn't as large to Riachuelo and to the whole market. And last year it was a 14 million market of people who didn't consume it and started consuming it. And when it comes to categories, I think, yes, there's a market for indie games, maybe not for every shop, because it's difficult sometimes to translate everything into a brick and mortar shop. But if it's an online marketplace, then you can have everything for everyone. So we want to be the final destination, as I said, right? Whenever you think about a product related to a game, we want Riachuelo to be top of mind. People will go to Riachuelo. So we will need to have a broader portfolio. That's not easy. You know, it's not easy to work with all of that, especially when you think about the bureaucratic side of it, all of the red tape. And the other question can go to Bruna. How do contracts and agreements for licensing work when it comes to um, royalties? Yeah, it's almost like I'm getting a new graduate degree, an undergraduate degree in that after so many contracts. Well, you paid compliments to Usoft, and we have to be flexible. Of course, you have to have some points that come from abroad, but we need to make things work in a way that makes sense in the reality in Brazil. With the current FX rate between Brazilian reals and the dollars, you can't have the same results in Brazil as you'll have in the United States. This is a watershed, this point that Bruno mentioned, and that has all been intensified with the pandemic. Sometimes you only had a contract signed in dollars, you had a forecast, and then they would get a part of that and they would pay a certain amount in advance. But that is an amount in dollars. So when you have a contract that was signed with a dollar at 380 reals, and then suddenly you have a dollar at 6 reals, how that works. And you have production costs, distribution costs, right? Of course, I think what sets us apart as Ubisoft is whenever we speak about licensing, we're focusing on fans, as Julia said. So we want to use our whole ecosystem to say, hey, you Rainbow Six fans, you can find this new collection in Riachuelo. So we had a project with Julia and pro players from Rainbow Six because there are many companies that do this, right? Some companies say, hey, you want our brand? Here you go, and I'll deal with it. And that's not how we see it. That's not how we do it. Because then what would happen is Julia would give me a ring and say, hey, I've got a problem here. Bernardo was with me at another event, and I know he knows what I'm going to say now. But when we were launching Rainbow Six, that was one of the most successful in-person events that we had before the pandemic. It's important to underscore that was before the pandemic. And that event was really successful because of the support we got from Ubisoft. Because they really know what fans want. And that was really successful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us here for this discussion. I know this was a quick discussion, but I hope you have had a chance to learn some things. And over to you, Nivi. She's looking good. Look at her. Thank you very much for having us. Should you need us, let us know, and we'll be here again. Bye-bye. Thank you. Sorry, Bruna. You were going to say something. No, I just wanted to say thank you. You look great, Nivi. Thank you, Han. And you were saying, something about whoever plays uh, Just Dance or Rainbow Six. and they being different gamers, it's not necessarily a different gamer. This gamer right in front of you plays them both. And it's great that you mentioned that, Bruna. We have our Just Dance reality show on Multishow next week. Bye bye. Julia Medeiros, Bruna Soares, and Bernardo Mendes, thank you. We'll now have a quick break, and I'll see you in 5 minutes. Stay tuned.
Big Festival 2021, the biggest games festival in Latin America.